Hello, everybody. I'm here with Aslak Halasoy, Matt Wynn, and Julian Biesmans. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. All co-founders of Cucumber to talk to us a little bit today about the initial days of Cucumber and how it got started, and provide a little bit of advice to those of you looking at starting up your own company. So my first question is really just, I would love to hear about some of the history of BDD, how it came to be. The three of you were there really from the beginning and initial concept of behavior-driven development. So please take it away, Aslak.
Hello, yeah, this is Aslak. So BDD started in around 2003, 2004, in a company called ThoughtWorks, where I used to work together with a few other people who were doing test-driven development training for customers. And Dan North, he was one of these people, and he's the sort of creator of of BDD. He had noticed that the people that he was trying to teach test-driven development to very frequently struggled to understand that the practice was a development practice and not a testing practice. And Dan was very much into something called linguistic programming at the time, NLP, and basically was trying to figure out a better way to teach test-driven development. And what he came up with was behavior-driven development, which is a variation on test-driven development where we don't use the words test. Rather than talking about test, we're talking about behavior, to emphasize that it's not really about testing, it's about specifying what behavior is. And this community grew out of ThoughtWorks around 2004, and various tools were created, and Cucumber was created about 5 years later, when I had already been in this community 5 years. Yeah, so there was about 5 years of initial experimentation before even Cucumber was born. So yeah, this started way before Cucumber.
Wonderful. And then what was going through your mind? I'll ask Matt this next question. When you decided to turn BDD into a company, and I'll go through the room and kind of from Matt to Aslak to Julian, what were you doing before you made this leap to Cucumber, and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, so there's a big leap between the BDD coming around and us creating a company. So I think the kind of trigger for it, for the commercial side of it, really was probably when Aslak and I decided to write a book. I'd been answering a lot of questions on the mailing list. I was a Cucumber user. I was a sort of early adopter of these ideas, and I was on the mailing list. And David Chalinsky, who just published the RSpec book, told the publishers, I think there's a whole book, there was one chapter which I think Aslak you wrote, didn't you, in the RSpec book about Cucumber.
Yeah. And
David recommended that I wrote it just because I was kind of good at answering questions on the mailing list. So they approached me, would I like to write a book about Cucumber? And I immediately approached Aslak and said, should we do this together? So we did, and that was published in, I think, 2011. And because I was a freelance kind of contractor at the time, people started approaching me because I'd written a book, assuming that I must know something about this. And particularly like the BBC were one of the early companies that I started doing consulting work for. And I realized that like this was a lot more lucrative than doing per hour programming work. And so I was actually able to sort of start to build this lifestyle where I could do like 4 or 5 days work a month of training people, training whole teams in how to do this stuff that I was learning about. and then spend the rest of the time like working on the open source or writing blog posts, that kind of thing. And it felt like a really kind of cool, sustainable system. And then, you know, we started to talk about how we could scale that out and make it a kind of a proper thing.
Fantastic. And Aslak, I understand you were working at a commercial company doing a bit of Cucumber open source on the side.
Yeah, I started the Cucumber open source project 3 years before Matt and I wrote the book in 2008. And for the first 5 years of Cucumber's life, I was, well, the first 3 years I was still living in Norway, working for a consultancy. And then I moved to London and started working for a financial trading company, which paid really well, but it wasn't something that I was deeply passionate about. And I also had some issues with, you know, whether this was really what I wanted to do from an ethical perspective. So I was kind of looking for a way to make a living out of Cucumber because I'd seen other people doing it. You know, Matt had already been doing it for a few years. And I met some other people at the QCup conference that we'd started organizing who'd built companies around it. I think, what was it called?
Oh yeah, the Danish guys that built the mobile automation thing. What was it called?
What was it called? Anyway, they sold it to Xamarin, who was later bought, but they bought by Microsoft. I can't remember. But anyway, I was very envious of all of these people building, you know, companies around Cucumber, which is sort of like, that's my thing. I want to do this, but I was too scared to quit my well-paid job and go all in. But then
Julian was somewhere in between, because as I started to get this training work coming my way, I actually started to get more than I could handle. And I met Julian through the conference, and you started doing training courses with me. I remember you were the first person I subcontracted to do a training course at the BBC.
Yeah.
I was just looking at the email for them complaining, saying, "Who is this guy?"
No, that was nice. We did indeed meet at conferences. So I started my journey as a freelancer in 2003, and, you know, already in agile world, trying to bring agile practices to different startups here in Belgium. I'm based in Belgium, and I quickly found out about BDD, and it was like, whoa, this is fantastic. This is really something that can change the software industry in some way. And trying to teach it and learn it myself, I went to the BDD exchange, QCup, obviously, and I think I met you, Aslak, at the RailsConf in Baltimore in 2009 or 10, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ate crabs together.
We ate crabs, yeah.
That was really nice. And yeah, I was really looking up to you two and learning about BDD. And then it was the time where Node.js was brand new, and I was seeing a potential there. Everybody was like, well, this is just tutorial, I'm never gonna get anywhere with it. See where we are today. But still, I was coming from the Ruby world, and I wanted to just do the BDD stuff as usual. And in the JavaScript world, it was definitely not yet a thing. And it was obviously missing Cucumber. So I was like, oh, that's annoying. I would like to have Cucumber to be able to practice BDD and teach it to the people where we want to do JavaScript together. And yeah, we started the JavaScript implementation of Cucumber, and that's how basically things get interesting, because I showed it to Aslak, and you seemed pretty convinced that it was a good enough implementation, and that's how things started on the open source side of things. And then, yes, all these gigs with the BBC at the time with you, Matt, we did some together, and then you decided I was good enough to do some by myself, and that was pretty exciting times to go to those big companies, being just a young freelancer myself.
We went to Amazon together as well, didn't we? Because they needed JavaScript, and I was scared. And
yeah, Yeah, we were running Cucumber.js on a USB key on the TV there because they had no other way to automate their stuff. So that was pretty interesting, and yeah, we were hacking stuff there. Yeah.
One very unusual thing about Cucumber is you are all in very, very different locations, and the entire team is very spread out across countries, geographies, and time zones. And you've been doing that since the beginning, and it kind of shows the universal need of BDD across software development teams, no matter where you are. It also shows that even, in this day and age when we're all working from home or working remotely to some extent, it really is possible to get something amazing off the ground without needing to be together in the same office every day. So I'm going to ask something, a little bit unscripted. How was that starting up with, you were meeting up at various conferences, but not there, day to day. You've obviously found a way to collaborate virtually extremely well, and then solve your customers' problems. Were there any special challenges with that, or was it very seamless for you?
Well, the way open source works is that it is distributed in time and space by its very nature.
Yes.
The vast majority of open source projects out there, if not all of them, they are
everywhere.
They're everywhere, right?
And
at any time. And this is the context in which the three of us met. We met on a mailing list, and then in some chat rooms, and then eventually we would meet face to face at a conference, and we would keep bumping into each other at conferences. And by the time we decided we were going to work together, we already had years of experience working working asynchronously, remotely in different time zones, and so on. So we were already quite used to it. That's not to say it doesn't have challenges, but it was what we knew.
Right.
Yeah, I think we evolved an understanding of the kinds of things that are better talked about face to face, and we developed a rhythm for, as Cucumber the company got bigger, we developed a rhythm for getting in the same room together kind of roundabout quarterly, where we'd sort of batch up some of the maybe more difficult conversations, or like the kind of conversations where you either needed to be able to kind of read somebody else's energy, or be able to just draw and have stuff up on the walls. These are the days before Miro, which does make all of that a lot easier. But even then, there's no substitute for being in the same room for certain things. But we found we could get that done with 2 or 3 days in a quarter, and batch up those kinds of conversations. And then, the general rest of the day-to-day work we could do, like Aslak says, distributed. And I think the thing that I want to emphasize from what Aslak said is it's that thing about being distributed in time as well. So a wonderful thing about open source is you kind of find the right time to do the work for you, and you're able to pick up and pull from, whatever needs done, and you can contribute at a time when you've got your energy for it, rather than feeling that you have to show up between 9 and 5 and
you're not on someone else's deadline.
Yeah, well, it's not just about someone else's deadline. I mean, that's a whole nother thing we can get into about open source and the lack of deadlines, but just about your timing, that you're tending to work asynchronously. So I'll make my contribution, I'll push it in, then you have a look at that, you make your contribution, you push that in, and we're all working together on a shared thing, but we're working on it when we can rather than when we have to. And I think it's a great thing in a lot of ways, really. But it really helps you to distribute, because you don't have to try and synchronize and get everybody working together at the same time. You get used to ways of, writing a proposal in a Google Doc and then having other people comment on it later and that kind of thing. So we used a lot of those tools, Google Docs, Trello, really they were sort of a fundamental heart of the company, really, to make it happen. We couldn't have done it without a lot of those tools.
And lots of video conferencing and chat as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we're all getting very good at right now. How many open source users or downloads are there for Cucumber? And did you have any sense from the beginning as like that it would get as big as it has gotten?
No, of course not. I mean, if I had a sense of that from the beginning, I wouldn't have waited 5 years to quit my job and build a company around it, right? I just checked the numbers, and in a decade, there's been about 200 million downloads of Cucumber. Now, that's if you count, all the different implementations and also ignore the fact that some people may be downloading it several times and so on. But it's still 200 million sounds kind of nice.
It's a nice round number.
Nice round number. No, I had no idea. We must have hit some kind of nerve somewhere to make it this popular. I think.
Fantastic.
It's funny, the problem that we are trying to solve today, it's very similar to the problem that we were trying to solve when this whole thing started 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago. It hasn't really changed. The requirements are still pretty vague. Customers don't really know what they want. Feedback loops are really slow, and programmers write unmaintainable code for various reasons, right? These are the kind of things that BDD and Cucumber are trying to address, and hasn't really changed in 15 years, and I don't think it's really going to change.
It's even longer than that, isn't it? Like Fred Brooks was writing about it in the 1960s. The hardest part of building a software system is deciding precisely what to build. Yeah, it's a universal problem.
And people still aren't great at it, so hence the need for ongoing support.
Yes, I think that's part of the reason why the tool's become popular, because it's trying to solve a problem that seems to be eternal. And it's not obviously not a silver bullet, nothing is, but I think a lot of people have realized that BDD and Cucumber can make things a little bit better.
But I think something else to say about this as well, related to like entrepreneurship, is that the three of us all came to this thing because we were interested in it. Like we none of us started it because or got involved in the open source project because we thought it was going to make money. We got involved in the open source project because it solved a problem that was bothering us, and then we figured out that there was a company. And I think that was important, certainly for me, to have the kind of resilience to be able to get through the tougher bits of running a company. That it mattered to me, that I believed it was important. Because it's not easy all the way through, is it? And I think it would have been a lot harder to stick at it through those tough bits if it was something that we didn't have so much sort of belief in.
That you all have passion for it, absolutely. And Julian, what was the most rewarding thing about your journey as an entrepreneur, and what advice do you have for anyone else looking at starting a company?
I think what I the main takeaway from this whole adventure is really the people. Meeting so many talented and passionate people. This whole enterprise has shifted my perspective on what is the perfect job, because we really valued humans at Cucumber, and that's something that is really dear to my heart, and I think Matt would be on the same page with this, and also you as Slack. It's really, we wanted everybody to feel really welcome and doing a job they just enjoy every day, and being part of a team which is nice to each other, and I learned a lot there. I think it's probably one of the best places I've worked with, people so nice to each other, and I think it played a huge part in the success of this company, how we treated each other, basically. So I think that's really what matters in the end, is when you go home and you leave your computer because you're already home, maybe, but you can reflect on your day and say, oh, well, those are really great people and I enjoy working with them, and I want this to perpetuate. So whatever I'm doing in the future, and with SmartBear today, is really the main focus. Is just make sure that everybody enjoys what they're doing, and that's what I've been in at the time there. And so my advice for new entrepreneurs, I think one thing we probably all learned as well is that you're probably good, very good at certain things. The three of us were developers, but it doesn't mean that you're good at everything. So one main learning during this project was to be able to delegate and say, okay, this is not my field. This is not something I can't do myself. And it's fine to call for help and find the right people who will enjoy and do the things better than yourself. So I think being able to delegate properly and recognize where are your limits is super important when you start something. And just, you never accomplish anything by yourself. It's always a team effort somehow. Might be your local team or people outside of it. You just build on top of other things all the times, and it's really important, I think, to recognize that and recognize your limits.
Super. Now we are just about out of time on our episode here. We will have part 2 to talk about the journey of Cucumber and connection with SmartBear. But any last words from Matt on advice to new founders?
Don't be in it for the money. I think you won't be able to get there. If it's going to be hard, it's going to be probably much harder than you can even imagine. And I think if you need to find, I think it's Amy Hoy who said, you need to find customers that you care about, because if you don't like your customers, you will not be able to put in the hours and have the patience to be able to do the work needed to be able to build a business that can meet their needs. So you need to find customers that you care about, and you need to do it because you care about them, not because you want to make money from them. Because I think otherwise it's too hard to stay motivated.
That is great. So I'm hearing good people, nice people, be passionate about the cause, not the money, and like your customers. That's all very important.
Can I add one thing?
Aslak, yes.
I also think it is incredibly important to make sure that your company can survive financially, right? And what we decided to do, which worked well for us, was to launch our product early, to get early feedback from our customers, and try to be profitable from day one. We never took external investment. We talked about it when things were difficult, but we felt that would be incompatible with our culture, because we're doing this because we're passionate. And as soon as you bring in external investors, all that passion goes out the window. All you're trying to do now is to satisfy the return on investment from the investors, right? So, and what we did was, launch early, talk to the customers all the time, and try to stay profitable from day one. It isn't necessarily, I'm not saying that's easy, but it's what allowed us to maintain the culture and the niceness that Julian talked about.
Fantastic pieces of advice from all of you. That's something I think everybody can take and use if they're looking at starting something, or even joining a bigger company. Look for those things. Even if you're not the founder, you want to like the people you're working with, the customers, have a passion for what you're doing. That is great. So thank you all. We will wrap up this episode of SmartBear Founder Series. Really appreciate your time today, and I hope everybody enjoys listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.